there, welcome to Fun Ahead TV. I'm David. Odds are if you clicked on this video, it's because you're at least a little bit curious about why I just said Porsches are difficult to work on. Well, fact of the matter is I didn't say they're difficult to work on, but whenever I tell people that I work on Porsches, that's always their first question is, aren't those cars really difficult to work on? Well, the answer to that question is actually no. You would think that just because we have to do a lot of engine out services on these cars that actually they're very challenging to work on, but the fact of the matter is they're very DIY friendly. In this video, I'm gonna give you a few examples of why exactly that is. I know, because of the engine out thing, it might seem completely ridiculous. And feel free to blow me up in the comments if you think otherwise, but I'll try and convince you that actually, they're pretty DIY friendly cars to own.
Rippin', tearin', the rippin' and the tearin'.
All right, now in front of me is the 2.5 liter flat six engine out of this, my 1998 Porsche Boxster. Now I'm not gonna go into heavy detail right now about this project and what we're doing, but if you're at all curious, go check out the playlist on my channel called Budget Base Model Boxster, and you can get yourself up to speed on what exactly is happening with this thing. But you might be saying to yourself, okay, David, you just told me that these cars are easy to work on, yet you had to pull the engine out of this car to do whatever the heck it is you're having to do on this car. And yes, you're exactly right, we did. The thing of it is, actually Porsches are meant to have their engines dropped out of them in order to do service. Porsche designed these cars so that you could drop the engines out of them relatively simply. Now I know you're probably saying to yourself, okay dude, you and your stupid two-post lift, that's gotta make dropping an engine out of one of these nice and easy. Now let me tell you, that 911 sitting right over there, I've owned for quite a while, and I owned before we had this place right here, and I have dropped the transmission out of that car on a garage floor with nothing but some jack stands and me laying on the ground and scooting all around. And even though I didn't drop the engine, it can be done on the garage floor with the car just on some jack stands. And if you invested in some quick jacks, then dude, you could do an engine out on one of these really easy peasy. Now let me be very, very clear. Not every job on one of these cars requires dropping the engine. The reason we've dropped the engine out of this car is that we are replacing the timing chain guides, and the valve covers are completely up against the frame rails of the car when the engine is in the car. Therefore, we wouldn't have any clearance at all to do what we need to do. Additionally, we're replacing quite a few things on top of the engine having to do with the intake manifold and other things, which fortunately in the case of the Boxster, you can have plenty of access to do with the engine in the car thanks to the fact that it just has a big wide open engine cover that can come off nice and easy and you have full access to the top of the engine. However, in the case of a 911, that's not gonna happen. So let me give you a quick scenario of something that is not exactly accessible or easily accessible with the engine in the car. Now, as I mentioned on the Boxsters, you have full access to the top of the engine with the engine cover off. Obviously, there's no engine in this car right now, but once this engine cover is off, you can basically do whatever you want with regards to the intake manifolds or whatever. If you need to get in the valley of the engine, valley because it's a flat six, then you very much can do so. Let's go ahead and look at the 911, for example. As you can see here, when you pop the hood of the 911, this is what you are greeted with. And you can see buried back here are the intake manifolds. Here's one, here's the other one. And if you need to get into the valley of the engine, AKA below the intake manifolds and plenums, then you're faced with a serious challenge. And the fact of the matter is, you don't really have much access. So you can either do one of two things. One, just drop the engine entirely and do what you are wanting to do. Or two, you can actually just loosen up the engine mounts and support the engine, and you can drop it a few inches with everything attached. Well, a couple inches is probably okay before you really start stretching things. But imagine if you have 2 more inches of room, you're definitely going to have much more clearance to work on everything that you need to do. Now, an example of something that would be hard to access is actually something that a subscriber of mine recently asked me about. And he asked, David, can you replace the digital oil level sender on an M96, M97 engine with the engine inside the car? And of course he has a 911, so his setup would be basically just about the same as my car. So looking at the engine here from the front, which is basically the exact angle that you see the engine when you're looking into the back of the 911, all you would really need to do in the case of, well, a Boxster or a 911 is remove the AC compressor, which is normally sitting right here, and you would have fairly good access to this, which is the digital oil level sender. Now, I already loosened this, so we can go ahead and see if this will come all the way up and out with the intake manifold in place. Now, this is a pretty long device because it has to go all the way down into the sump from the top of the engine in order to read the oil level. So we may or may not have clearance. Let's see. Yeah, we don't have clearance. So obviously I just have this intake manifold sitting here just for demonstration purposes, but if I move this out of the way, then you can see that, yeah, then we can get this thing up and out of there. But it requires this being out of the way in order to do so. And as you could probably tell, with the engine in the car, getting this thing out would be such a pain in the butt. We could access basically this bolt from the back of the car, but getting access to the other 2, 4, 5 bolts towards the front of the car to remove this would be such a pain. Plus the fact that we have the fuel rail and injectors sitting right here that are mounted down. There's wire harness all around this. Getting this thing out with the engine in the car would be an absolute nightmare. So Tom, there you have it. I'm sorry to say, yeah, this would be one of those jobs you'd probably want to just go ahead and wait for your next engine out service in order to replace that digital oil level sender. But hey, that's one of those things that you just put on the list of items that need to get done once the engine's out. Have all that stuff refreshed all at once, and then your engine will be good to go for quite a while. Let's look at one more example really quickly. Alrighty, now here we are underneath my 986 Boxster. Again, engine out as you can see. So we've got very, very good access to all of the things that are normally extremely close quarters with the engine, but I can just reach up and touch any given one of them. One of those items is the fuel filter, and you might be going, dude, but it's the fuel filter. You would think that would be very accessible. Well, yes and no. Let's go ahead and look at where that is. So any guesses on where that is? If we're looking around, scanning the engine room, no, okay, I don't see it yet, I don't see it. Oh, is it right over there? Can you see it? In fact, we can just see the very edge of it right now. The fuel filter is right there. It is up in the tunnel of this car. Now, even as the car sits with no engine in it, this is going to be a pain to do because we've got to reach up and through this tunnel. Now, fortunately, all we have to do is take off this little foam cover to get better access to it. But if the engine were up in the car, then you would have the 2 primary coolant hoses going to and from the engine right here, and therefore our access to this entire area would be much, much more limited than it is currently. So while it's still going to be a pain in the butt to replace this fuel filter, at least now we don't have massive coolant hoses and then immediately, like starting right here, engine. So we would have this much room to work with to get our hands up through here to get that fuel filter out. And obviously we're not accessing it from this side right here because these are metal coolant pipes at this point. So, you know, you're not just pulling it straight down this way. So anyway, that's just yet another example of something that you would want to replace when the engine is out of the car, and something that you would just want to put on the list of items that you'd want to do during your next engine out service. Obviously a fuel filter is one of those things that is a very clear maintenance item that you should do every so often. Fortunately, in today's day and age with current fuel filters aren't getting plugged up like crazy left and right. But it isn't something that you want to let go for 20 years.
And so the big looming question remains. Are these things hard to work on? Well, in my personal opinion, anyone who's fairly proficient with a wrench can go fairly far with one of these and be able to do a lot of the stuff themselves. But it is absolutely no secret that they are time, energy, and money intensive, and it definitely helps to have a lot of resources at your disposal. But like anyone who has owned one of these for a long time would tell you, these are actually quite reliable, contrary to what you read on forums. So you can go a long time between major services, i.e. taking the engine out of one of these. So you just have to be pretty proactive as an owner. You have to be pretty enthusiast-minded and just kind of create a list of everything that you need and want to do during your next major service when the engine is out. Do all that stuff. Then, once you put the engine back in the car, it will be very reliable for you for the next many years until the next major service. So like I said, not too hard to work on, and I encourage each and every one of you who have maybe not tried to dabble with working on one of these, who owns one, to just attempt it. Do a little job, and then kind of just little by little start building some confidence, and next thing you know, you might be dropping the engine out of one of these. You never know. And that's my opinion on that. Feel free to drop yours down in the comments below. Thank you all so much for being here today. I appreciate each and every one of you for being here. Yes, you, I'm looking right at you, and I will see you all in the next video. See ya.
Rippin', tearin'. The rippin' and the tearin'.
Dude, I'm kicking the ball.